Now let's say we want to create a list of restaurants and add all the restaurants in the city to this list. Now creating such a list can be a daunting task since all these restaurants will have a name, rating and cost per person. Now this task can be simplified by the use of classes and objects. So let us look at the problem statement. Create a class called restaurants. This class will have 3 properties: name, rating and cost for one. Create 5 objects of this class. Print out all the values of these objects. Let's see how we can do this. So we go to our IDE and create a new class called restaurants. Now let's create 3 constructor variables which will be the properties of this class. Variable name will have a string data type. Variable rating will have decimal values, so it will have a double data type. And cost for one will have integer data type. Now since this class has no function, we do not need these curly braces and we can remove them. Let's create our main function now. But this time we will create it in a separate file. Now let's create 5 objects for the class we created and pass the values in the parentheses. Done. Now let's print the objects using the print statements. Let's look at the output. Uh-oh, something went wrong. We did not get the values that we had passed in the objects, but some random string. What could have gone wrong? We created the class and objects correctly for sure, since we have done this before. Which means that there must be something wrong with these print statements, right? Yes. So actually, when the compiler runs programs with objects, it creates some names of its own to refer to these objects. If you want to print the data that is passed in these objects, you will have to convert the class to a data class. We'll see what a data class is in just a minute. But first, let's complete this problem statement. So to convert this class to a data class, all we need to do is add the word data here before the keyword class. Now let's run the program again. Yes, we get the values we have passed for each restaurant object. So, right now we had only 5 objects. But in real-life applications, this list can be for hundreds or even thousands of restaurants, right? We will obviously have to pass data for each, which means that we cannot avoid creating objects for each. But can we reduce the code for printing this data? Yes, and if you think hard, you'll know the answer yourself. We can use loops for it, right? So let's use the for loop here. We write the keyword for, then inside these parentheses we write the iterator, let's say res. Now let's say this loop will run how can we write the iteration statement here? It is no standard increment for numbers that we want. These are all independent objects. So, how can we convert these objects into something that can help us iterate through it one by one? Take 5 seconds to think. Well, we can make a list of these objects, can't we? Yes, we absolutely can. So let's create a mutable list so that we can add more objects if we want. We write the keyword var, then we give a name to the list, let's say restaurant list, put the equal to sign, write mutable list of and these parentheses after it. Now within these parentheses, we will pass all the objects that we want to store in this list. Let's store 3 right now. And let's use the add function to add the other 2. We could have mentioned all 5 here itself, but we did this to help you revise the concept of adding elements to a list. Now our class is a data class, right? So if we print the list, it should give the data of all the objects. Let's use the print statement and pass the list name inside these parentheses. Now let's look at the output. Yes, we get the data of all the 5 restaurants. But we get it all in a line. How can we get them all printed separately? Well, you remember we had started using the for loop and then left it midway. We can use the for loop now to iterate through a list, right? Let's do it. For res in restaurant list, we can print res. This will iterate through each of the elements of the list one by one and print out the values of each object. Now let's run this code. Yes, we get the output in different lines for each object. So you see how using lists and loops helped us shorten this code, and we did not have to print each object's data individually. So we have completed our problem statement in an effective way. Now let's go back to one thing that we left off midway, and that is data classes. So what is a data class? Well, a data class is just like a regular class that holds some data. Now when we will develop Android applications, a lot of times we will need classes that will not really perform any function, but will hold a lot of data. For such cases, we convert our normal classes into data classes. As you saw in this video, data classes help the compiler deal with data inside the objects and not just the objects' names. So that was all for this video. Click next to learn more about data classes.